Is tribute to mothers, and so we're going to talk about one special mother in the Bible, and we've mentioned her before, Lydia. Lydia? Where is she? You were named after the Lydia that we're going to talk about in the Bible. You were named after her.
She sells purple clothes.
She sold purple, that is correct. And guess what you're wearing today? What a coincidence! And no, Lydia did not call me and ask me to preach on Lydia. All right, let's go to Acts 16. Acts 16. Well, Noah got us off to a really good devotion there, and I give a tribute to the moms. Acts 16. We're going to back up here just a little bit, verse 11. Verse 11 here. Therefore, loosing from Troas, we came with a straight course to Samothracia, and the next day to Neapolis. Keep in mind, this is Luke writing the narrative here on their ventures with Paul. And from thence to Philippi, which is the chief city of that part of Macedonia, and a colony, and we were in that city abiding certain days. And on the Sabbath we went out of the city by a riverside, where prayer was wont to be made, and we sat down and spake unto the women which resorted thither. And a certain woman, named Lydia, a seller of purple, of the city of Thyatira, which worshipped God, heard us, whose heart the Lord opened, that she attended unto the things which were spoken of Paul. And when she was baptized, and her household, she besought us, saying, If ye have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come into my house and abide there. And she constrained us. And so I want to talk today about this woman that there's not a lot mentioned about her. This is her window. This is her introduction to us. But we learn a lot about her right from this short passage relating to her life and her encounter with the Apostle Paul. This was during Paul's second journey. Remember, he went through and then they wanted to go back and visit the brethren and try to confirm the souls of the disciples. So they made one pass through and then doubled back to try to check up on the disciples to see the outcomes now that they've had time to serve the Lord. You know, it's one thing, as we learned, of course, in our study today, to accept the Lord as your Savior. It's another thing to then follow through with that service. The salvation from hell is instant. In the blink of an eye, you accept Christ as your Savior, and that part's done. But now you're facing a whole life of challenges, and there may have been challenges leading up to that one event. So I don't want to trivialize it and make it sound like, well, it was just, but I'm saying when you cut through the problems and the it might be family holding you back. You might be reluctant because, well, that's going to put you on the outs with your family. So that might hold you back from accepting Christ. It could be a million different reasons. But when you cut through all of that and you make that decision, it's instant. But now you've got a whole life of challenges to build on that most holy faith. And the devil knows it. He knows he's got a while to work with you. Okay? And so he's going to hit you with everything. He couldn't stop that, okay, as much as he may have tried. So now he's going to work you over for the rest of your days. Okay? But you know what? If it was worth getting saved from hell, it's worth what will come in the future. Amen? Well worth it. Okay, the Bible lets us know that it's well worth it. So here he is on the second journey, and he encounters some women down by the riverside. And so on the Sabbath, he goes down by the river, and there's this Bible study going on, as it were, with a bunch of women. And no other woman is mentioned here. And so I'm going to go on the assumption that in verse 13, and on the Sabbath he went out of the city by the riverside, where prayer was wont to be made. What does the New King James say on that?
Customary.
It was customary, okay? So that was their custom. And we sat down and spake unto the women. Okay, so they were, we're just going to go on the assumption these were godly women, okay, and who resorted to prayer on the Sabbath. Okay, so they were people who believed God, as it were. Okay, but then he singles out this one woman in particular, a woman named Lydia. No other woman's mentioned, just Lydia. And he mentions her occupation, that she was a seller of purple. So we pick up right away that she was a businesswoman. She was from a distant city, Thyatira, but here she is in Philippi. And so she's traveled. She's a traveling businesswoman to sell her purple. Okay? So we find out that she is an industrious type of woman. She is in business, we'll just say, for herself, and she's making a living. We also find out that she is not by herself, that she has a household. And so that she's responsible not only for herself and her own welfare, but the welfare of her household. Right? So we're getting some information just in a short passage, picking up some particulars about this woman named Lydia. Okay? So I want to look at Lydia for just a little bit and just note some of these qualities in relation to Mother's Day. First of all, it wasn't easy being a woman back in this time frame. We look at today, the status of women today, in particular the Arab countries, which basically are throwbacks to earlier periods of time where women are treated about as equal as your dog and your donkey. Okay? They're basically possessions. Okay? And so, far from what God had intended for the man and woman to come together, to join the wife, and for them to together love the Lord and serve the Lord. Far cry from that. Just another possession. And treated, as we read in various reports from time to time, treated just like a possession. In fact, perhaps less than the man's other possessions. And so, over there, women were kind of that second-class citizen. We also find a little bit of clues when Jesus spoke to the woman of Samaria, that his disciples were surprised that he had engaged in a conversation. Now, I don't know, maybe specifically because she was a woman or because she was a Samaritan. And they didn't have much dealings with Samaritans, so it may have leaned more toward that. But nonetheless, women were treated differently in the eyes of men. And so, horribly so, that God had to write in a, what would you call it, like I'll use the word amendment. In other words, he permitted divorce, okay? He permitted it because of the hardness of their hearts, because they were mistreating the women and just divorcing for any reason. Okay, so that wasn't fair to them. So he allowed that to happen. So here she is, a woman, and there's no mention of her husband. No mention of a husband, but of a household. Okay? So I don't know that we can exclude the fact that there was exclude that there may have been a husband, but it just says household. So we can't say that there wasn't, we can't say that there was. I'm guessing, this is just a guess, that if there was a husband, given the times and given the emphasis of the men, that he probably would have been mentioned. So I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say that we're probably just dealing with her children. But that being said, her place in this house, she's a businesswoman, probably the only breadwinner, and she cares for her home. So she's a businesswoman having to deal in a business world where it was predominant by men. And so she had to cut her way through, she had to forge her way, no doubt, to make her mark in that world. Now, I'm not saying that in any way suggesting that women were inferior. I'm just saying the way they were treated was such. But we look at the virtuous woman, and we see she also was industrious. Okay? She also was one that was worked with her hands, and she was all about her home, all about her home, all about her husband, all about her children, as she worked on into the night, we're told. And she just didn't rest, as it were. And so as he painted this picture of this virtuous woman. So I picture Lydia like that. Just a hard-working, traveling person away from her family to make ends meet and fighting the odds that were against her of her day in her culture. Okay? But we notice some specific things of interest. in this woman that she wasn't all about business. It wasn't just that she was just out making a buck. Even in an honorable sense, to provide for her family. She wasn't just all about the almighty dollar. She was concerned for spiritual things as well. That's why we find her down at the river with the other women, in prayer, okay, as was their custom. And so we find that this other side of her was a side reserved for God, okay. And so she was business in the material sense, but she was all about business in the spiritual sense. That's a quality in any woman, as the virtuous woman suggests, that she does this because of her faith in her God. Okay, that's very, very crucial. I'm sure that was driving her in her life every bit as much as her own business. Okay, she made money because she had to, but she worshiped God because she wanted to. Okay, and there's a difference. With her mind, she made money, and with her heart, she loved God. So the other thing I want to point out is she was there at that particular time after Paul and company had been in Philippi for a certain number of days. Okay? They went down, they waited for the Sabbath and went down, and there they found her. So I look at that and I say, you know, God's providence. God's providence. What were the chances that she would meet Paul or Paul would meet her? Well, I would have to say this, that she positioned herself. There's decisions that we must make in order to position ourselves for God's blessings. They're not just accidental. We have to, you know, get an understanding of God and have God in our hearts, and then position ourselves to receive those blessings. So there she was with the other women down at the riverside in order for God to make the point of contact. Had she been anywhere else, maybe securing some business deal on the Sabbath, she would have missed this opportunity. But God was first. She put God first. And when she did that, she found herself in a position, in a certain place, at a certain time, where God then led Paul and company to go and meet at that particular place. Picture Philippi. I don't know how many people were in Philippi. I don't know how big the city was. But there were probably various places along this river. I believe it was God's providence, His leading. She could have been anywhere, but she was right there in that spot, in that moment, when Paul happened to be in town. Isn't that amazing? When I look over Vicki in my life, you know, it had to have been by the hand of God. Think of the size of California. California is our 4th largest state. Okay? Asher, what's the largest state?
3rd largest.
Third largest. We're the 4th, sorry. Asher, California is the 3rd largest. Correction. Okay?
Texas?
The very largest state is?
Texas? Alaska?
Alaska is number 1. Then what? You just said it.
Texas.
Then Texas. And then California. And then Montana. Okay, so California is the 3rd largest state. It's a big state. And if you ever travel from the southern part all the way to the northern part, it makes for a long day of travel. Kind of like our state. Just take California, turn it this way, that's Montana. Okay, it takes a long time to get across Montana. So think about it. When Vicki and I met her in a little town called Santa Clara. Santa Clara is just a blip on the radar as far as California is concerned. As big a state as that is, Santa Clara in the Bay Area is just a little blip on the radar. What were the chances when my mother left Havre that she would land in Santa Clara, California? Not San Diego, not San Francisco, not Redding, or anywhere else, but Santa Clara, of all places where Vicki and her family lived. That was just amazing. Now, okay, so now I'm there. What are the chances? In Santa Clara, it's maybe not a blip in the radar, but by our standards, it's a pretty good sized town. Okay? It would be like all of Montana. Okay? Pretty much. So what are the chances of us meeting up in Santa Clara? What are the chances of us going to the same junior high school? What are the chances? What are the chances that Lydia would be there at that precise moment that Paul was in town? And not that part of the river, that part of the river, or that part of the river, but that part of the river, and that moment, that morning. You see how God works? It's amazing in His mind, bringing man and moment together where He can see the heart, that if it had a chance, it had the opportunity, that it would embrace. So He saw Lydia's heart ahead of time. Did He force Lydia? Was it predetermined? Did He zap her? No, not at all. But she positioned herself. She got up that day. I'm going to go pray with the women. Her heart was there. God leading her. God led Paul to go there at that moment, and there you go. That's how God works. Positioning. Positioning. What were the chances? After Vicki and I were married, attending a large Baptist church, what were the chances of us finding that little hole-in-the-wall church called the Fellowship Mission Baptist Church in a very large town called Sunnyvale? Probably pretty small. What were the chances of us finding an apartment 3 blocks away from that little church building? When we tried to get an apartment in San Jose, and the Lord closed the door. The people were trying to buy a home, but it fell through. Sound familiar? People were trying to buy a home, and it fell through. And they couldn't move out of the apartment that we'd fallen in love with. We wanted that apartment so badly. It would put us right in San Jose. But the Lord in His mind says, no. You people, you kids, if I position you over here and introduce you to the truth, you're going to accept it. I can see it. So He closed the door on the apartment in San Jose, and so we go looking in Sunnyvale for an apartment. We're given the tour of the apartment, and we both agreed that it wasn't what we were looking for. We wanted a 2-bedroom. It was only a 1-bedroom upstairs. We wanted a 2-bedroom, probably downstairs, main level, ground level. And so it really wasn't what we were looking for. So we thanked the lady for showing it to us, and we got in the car in Vicky's 73 Vega and left. Okay? We got maybe a mile, maybe 2 down the road. And I said, I don't know, what do you think? Should we go back? And she was thinking the same thing. Yeah, then let's go get it. I said, okay. I made an illegal U-turn.
Don't listen, Alex.
How I found the truth. I made an illegal U-turn to go find the truth. Good. Headlines. Went back, knocked on her door, bothered her again, and said, you know what, we've changed our minds. We're going to take it. It wasn't our first choice. But you know what? I look in the Bible and I see that sometimes God deals with the second-born because the firstborn didn't want it. Right? Sometimes He reaches out to the second-born. God does things in many, many different ways. So it wasn't our first choice. But that apartment positioned us along the river, as it were. So that as Vicki began to shop around the area, as most wives will, they want to learn, they want to map the town now as far as where the shopping centers are. She began to venture out, and she found this little Baptist church building on a corner lot, and the sign out in front said, Fellowship Missionary Baptist Church, the friendliest church in town. Well, we better investigate that just to see if they are the friendliest church in town. So we visited that church. And I've told you the story many, many times that Vicki and I walked in, brand new young couple, been married, how long, Vicki? A couple months maybe, okay. Walked in, and about 20 people or so, 25 people or so with the little kids embraced us, made us feel real welcome. And so we eventually joined that church and have not looked back since. Little did we know what lay in store for us as we began our journey in the New Testament church. We had no idea what all would happen. But it's happened. Here we are. Here we are. God's providence. I imagine that Lydia was so happy that day that she decided to position herself. And she wasn't thinking, I'm going to position myself. She was just getting up to go to prayer meeting, like she had done before, whenever she was in Philippi. To her, that's all it was. See, we only see the one part of it. God sees all of it. And so she shows up, she positioned herself to receive the blessing for that day. She made that made that connection. And God plugged her into a whole nother dimension of life. It would no longer be just in general a religious, experience or appreciation for God in general. She would be brought into membership of a New Testament church. It would be her red letter day. And any day that a person joins a scriptural church becomes a red letter day for that person. So, of course, the emphasis or the trick is to stay with it and serve the Lord for the rest of our life. Now, here's another thing that I appreciate about Lydia. She heard Paul's preaching. She probably already had some spirituality and some opinions already formed as she prayed to God, as most people that you encounter do. When you encounter people, 9 out of 10 already have, well, no, I take that back, Andrew. 10 out of 10 have a faith. 10 out of 10. Even the atheists that Andrew talks to at work, they have a faith. They have a faith in humanism. Man is their God. So they have a faith in self. So 10 out of 10 people already have a faith, something that they latched onto, a belief system, a core philosophy that they walk and live by. So what I appreciate about Lydia is she listened to Paul intently. And it says here in verse, where does it say in the Lord, verse 14. Let's read that again. And a certain woman named Lydia, a seller of purple of the city of Thyatira, which worshipped God, so that was already in place, which worshipped God, heard us, whose heart the Lord opened, that she attended unto the things which were spoken of by Paul. Paul's messenger, God's messenger, Paul, spoke the truth, and Lydia accepted it. Now, why do I appreciate that? Because I've talked to, as you have, many, many, many people over the course of your life. And you've presented them, we've all presented with the same truth, the same gospel. And not very many hear. Not very many listen. Not very many are interested. They're too busy trying to make a living. The other side of Lydia, they overemphasize the business part, the work part, but not the spiritual part. Well, we see that she was trying to balance it because she worshiped God, but there was something that she needed more, that God said she needed more. That's why he brought these two together, Lydia and Paul, and that's why he preached that message, and then she, as God touched her heart, opened up her heart to receive these things. Of course, the choice was hers, that she attended the things which Paul had spoken. And so little did she realize what she was getting herself into. A New Testament church. Well, she must have, I don't know what all Paul said, but I know the message back then was that you repent and you be baptized. That was the message. Okay, they didn't separate it out. Okay, because baptism in a New Testament church was all part of that good news, of that gospel. So as she obviously understood the next step because of verse 15, and when she was baptized, it doesn't say Paul preached baptism. Well, then how did she know she needed it? Because Paul did preach baptism. That was part of the good news. Okay? And when she was baptized, and her household, she besought us, saying, if you have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, if my being baptized into a New Testament church, granted now we're seeing things from a perspective of 2,000 years later. As far as a fuller understanding, it was a group of women. She and her household, as far as we know at this point, joined this body, this church, this ecclesia. Okay? But she says, if you've judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come into my house and abide there. And she constrained us. What do I get from that? She had a changed heart, people. She couldn't get enough now of this. She wanted to hear more. I'll tell you what, when the Lord gets a hold of us, and really gets a hold of us, she didn't just attend to the things that were spoken that day. She knew Paul had more to say. She knew there was more to learn. She was brand new at this. Even though she was a worshiper of God, she realized that she had not partaken up to this point of the fullness of what God wanted for her. Now she realized this is where God wanted her. Now she wants more. Come into my house and abide there. I want to hear more. And she constrains it. Now the business part of her comes out. She's trying to close the deal. She's putting a little emphasis on it. Come on, Paul. She's a business side of her, that energy now comes to the surface. And so they lingered there in that city. And as we go a little bit further, I won't go into this part, but we know that God had more people in mind to build this ecclesia in Philippi. There was a Philippian jailer. And so, but we're just focusing on Lydia. And all these attributes and all these qualities that we see just in this short introduction to her, what we can learn from her. And what I appreciate is that she led her household into the same truth and appreciation that she found personally. Her household was important to her. Not only in the fact that materially as a businesswoman traveling and being away from them in order to provide for them, but when she was baptized and her household, she said, I want my family to experience this too. And that's why I appreciate Tanya, for one, your taking up the reins and being the head of your house and encouraging your kids to come. And coming by yourself, you guys, on a Wednesday night. That's amazing. Okay? That's amazing to come by yourself on a Wednesday night. It's amazing. And then Linda, where did Tanya get her faith? From you. From you and others. Okay? And we read about that incident in Timothy. Paul came along, intersected Timothy's life, and he reaped the fruit of what his mother and his grandmother had impacted into him. Paul comes along and reaps the fruit of it. Yeah. Now Timothy, of course, needed, again, as Lydia, needed further steps or further processing in order to bring him into a full alignment with God and his purpose, the church. And once that was in place, of course, God worked with Timothy and fine-tuned him. And the inference is that Timothy was a pastor and then had some challenges there. And Paul had to encourage him to take up the fight around him, because Paul says, look, we're surrounded by wolves. And not everyone is going to be nice to you, Timothy. So you're going to have to kind of, in some respect, learn to be hard-nosed against this opposition. You're going to have to endure hardness as a good soldier. Okay, man up. And so we read occurrences of those women and their influences in the lives of these disciples. Paul appreciated Timothy and all that Timothy had was stepped up to do. But that was first planted by Lois and Eunice in his heart. Okay? And then we couldn't neglect Hannah. She brings their 4 arrows in the quiver each Sunday, and doing a wonderful job. Her sister is in competition with her mother. Hannah comes from 9 kids, and Esther's got 9 kids, probably working on the 10th as far as you know. But anyway, that didn't sound right, actually. I didn't mean for it to sound like that. Planning for the 10th, I should have said. Planning for the 10th, maybe. Okay. Andrew, I have to edit this part out. But it's a blessing to have kids. It really is. It's a challenge to raise them. To raise 3 sons, and it is a challenge. But as Noah said in his devotion, how did you word that? Love starts with the mother and ends with the mother. When all else is said and done, no matter what goes on, you'll always remember Mom for her contribution to your life. And all that she's done. You kids will not always appreciate Mom's exercise of motherhood. But when you're older, you will. As you look back, you will appreciate all of her contribution, her selfless energy, staying up late at night. Grace, you know about this. Mom, you know about this. Just the selfless acts, she's the unsung hero of the family. But we're here to sing her praises today. Amen? We're here to sing because of your contribution. Our sons will be forever indebted to Vicki for all that she has done. And will continue to do, because you never stop being a mom.
That's right.
I don't care how old the kids are. You'll never stop. You'll always have that role with you.
Okay.
And that God will bless you for your faithfulness to that position, to that role. So, moms, happy Mother's Day to you, and you just appreciate the good examples of strong women in the Scriptures who did their job, fulfilled their purpose and their calling, and so fulfilled the purpose of the Lord in childbearing for their own personal salvation, as it were, or fulfillment of God. So, shall we stand this morning? I better stop there before I get too much in trouble here.